right? This whole time you had this idea, and you were invested in the idea that you were a straight male, but maybe due to the fact that, from a religious background that always enforced a heterosexual relation with other people, you suddenly find out that that's not the case, and that's not 100% what you're attracted to. So you have this fear of, maybe being ostracized by your family, ostracized by the community, by your friends, whatever the case is, because you don't want to be alone, right? And all of a sudden you just switch the dial there, and maybe people won't accept you anymore. So that is definitely something that, that's another reason why you need to be right, because you're fearful of what would happen if you're.
This is a conversation between friends.
None of what is said here should be taken as legal advice.
We are not experts in any way.
Take what resonates and leave the rest.
Tough.
No, it's fine. We'll start. All right. So welcome back, everybody. So there was a slight hiccup. Need to restart. So here we are again. So we are on episode number. I don't remember the episode number anymore. 77?
87.
87. Are you sure? Yeah, 87. Shit. Okay. So on episode 87, today we will be discussing the need to be right. So I was talking to Michael about what I kind of was interpreting that as. So the most plain example that I can give you is somebody that comes from like a really religious background, right? So their way of life, their beliefs are usually enforced and very strict, right? And to some end, that ends up becoming their identity. And they believe in their ideas so much that they can't afford to be wrong. So they have to be right. It's a necessity, right? So that's kind of the background that I'm talking about in terms of the need to be right. But this doesn't only have to be in those contexts, right? Sometimes this also happens in relationships, like, with your significant other. Like there's an expression that goes around that says, women are always right, even when they're wrong, right? So like there's this need to be right all the time. Well, the whole point now is to kind of discuss that and look at it from like both perspectives, right? So from your opinion and from your perspective, what do you think about the idea?
Well, when you mentioned this topic initially, it kind of came across with some experience that I have encountered before with other people. I personally probably have done it at some point in my life as well, that I thought I was right about something, but ultimately I was challenged by somebody else who knew a little bit more or knew the correct facts, or different perspective also can challenge you, like the ideas that you have and the ideas that you grew up with. So at that point you realize that there is like a very famous saying that, all I know is that I know nothing, because ultimately we don't know nothing. Because, the example that I used a little bit earlier is like, or I like to use when I challenge like the physics idea, mathematics idea, is that who told us that gravity is a number like 9.0, 9.8, and so on. So, or the distance between the Earth and the Sun is with exact precision that number. Like, we just don't know. Which we learned that in school, and that's some ideas that we carry on with us. Ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't question when we were learning that, right? But as you grow up and you grow older, you start thinking about like, why the fuck do I need to believe that? And I think it has to do something with the ego, as I mentioned before, is that ego plays alongside to the to the need to be right all the time. So if you think you're right, even though if you're wrong, it fits your ego, and something that can lead you to thinking that you're better than everybody else, or you're right than everybody else. So it's always that conflict as well,
Mm-hmm.
until you get challenged by somebody, until you get challenged by somebody who lived a different perspective, who cannot agree with you. And going back to like religion, that I have very religious uncles or family members, and ultimately I cannot tell them they're wrong, because in their reality, of in their world, the way that they grew up, that's right for them. Whereas for me, it's a different idea. I can talk to them and mention like my perspective, but ultimately they are the persons who will eventually responsible to make the decision whether they're believed to be right or wrong. And we can even go into like ethics with this, but I don't know how far or how deep you want to get into the topic.
So something that you mentioned there, right? So when you get challenged on these ideas by another individual, this is where you go head to head with the ideas. But another way these ideas usually can be challenged is through life circumstances, right? So sometimes whatever the concept or idea is that you believe ends up being questioned or challenged, or sometimes it completely changes on you, right? Like, it's not unheard of if somebody goes through a tragedy that, again, going back to the religious example, that they went from believing in God to not believing in God simply because something terrible happened. And their thought is, if God was real, then he wouldn't have let this happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's really depending on the individual and the way they interpret it and how strong their beliefs are. So there's another part to this that I want to jump to, in the form of like, so yeah, at one point it's an ego investment in the form of like, your need to be right is because it makes your ego feel good, right? But another perspective that we can take is from fear, right? Like, you're fearful of being wrong because what happens if you are, right? So this is a good example. I don't know if this is a good example, but it's an idea. So imagine that your belief, and you firmly believe that you are a straight male, right? And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, life challenges you in some way and you have some sort of homosexual encounter. And then all of a sudden you end up finding out that that's something that you actually like, right? This whole time you had this idea, and you were invested in the idea that you were a straight male. But maybe due to the fact that, from a religious background that always enforced, a heterosexual relation with other people, you suddenly find out that that's not the case, and that's not 100% what you're attracted to. So you have this fear of, maybe being ostracized by your family, ostracized by the community, by your friends, whatever the case is, because you don't want to be alone, right? And all of a sudden you just switch the dial there, and maybe people won't accept you anymore. So that is definitely something that, that's another reason why you need to be right, because you're fearful of what would happen if you're actually wrong, and it's actually the opposite.
Well, going from that perspective, I feel like nowadays we're living on like 21st century. I think that's, especially like in the US, that's not really that case anymore. So, but picking
there
up
are definitely places in the world that aren't
absolutely
Western, right? So go ahead.
So definitely, yeah, I think fear can be one of those reasons why one will stick to their ideas to be like right. But once again, it all comes down to their ego. Because like if you weren't fearful of something, or like to be challenged in some perspective, like you mentioned, like life circumstances or some experiences that you have gone through, then you wouldn't be fearful. Like your ego wouldn't be fearful to be wrong. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting idea that I think everybody has gone through at some time, that you thought you were super, super right about something. And then boom, life puts you in the circumstances, or shows you like some people in your life, or whatever the case is, that challenge you the idea, challenge you the who you are. And it can change your perspective, like your persona of who you are, the way that you look at like around like the world. So
yep, for sure. So let's see, where else can we take this? So yeah, okay. So now we can talk more about having like an open mind, right? So I don't know if it's 100% necessary. Maybe this is something that comes with life experience, right? But I've always felt that approaching things with an open mind is usually the best approach, just because, again, when you become too invested into one idea and it's not right, then there's just a lot of time and energy that can be wasted, right? So again, approaching things with an open mind at least gives you the opportunity to explore different options, which could be a good and bad thing, right? Because you can also waste time by doing so many different things. when if you focused on one thing, you would have gotten a lot more done. So there's always a balance. It's never just 100% one way or 100% the other way, right?
Mhm.
So how do you approach things now? Do you usually approach things with an open mind, or do you still think you have that like that need to be right in some circumstances?
No, I think life has shown me that you have to be open-minded, and that's one of the
Mhm.
reasons like I like to be free and travel. Honestly, traveling opens your mind like a lot.
Mhm.
And in my like in my situation, I think open-mindedness, it began since I was a little kid, because when I moved on from Ecuador to the US, I had to be open-minded. I lived 12 years with people who look like me. I never, I like to also like usually talk about this because where I lived back in the days, you would ever see like a black person around.
Mhm.
There's always like Latinos or white people. And going to like a country, New York, where it's like super diverse, it was shocking. And adapting to that, it was challenging. And that's when I knew that, I had to I had to be open minded. I had to be realistic and be curious about what is out there. And honestly, that had changed my life. Ever since I was like young, I started, being curious about a lot of things, getting to know different type of people, different perspectives, talking to different type of people from different backgrounds. And
Mhm.
that's true. Like honestly, that's where you learn the most, and that's when
Mhm.
you start being humble about your ideas as well. Like whether you're right or wrong, and you think about things that you want in your life and things that you don't want in your life as well. So open-mindedness
Mhm.
is definitely the best approach to go about it. But I would say there is a limit though to open-mindedness, because circumstances in my life had definitely showed me that you need to put like core foundations on your life. Like, like pretty much the purpose that you want to be and live for, the things that you want to achieve, and the reasons why you're here. So
Mhm.
yeah, open-mindedness is good as long as they don't touch your values, your core values. Because ultimately, if you don't have core values, then you're just gonna be manipulated easily, or just uh, you're gonna be
Just flow with the wind. You'll just go with whatever feels good, right?
exactly, yeah.
So
Like
yeah,
you
that
will,
definitely something there.
hmm but yeah.
Go
What
ahead.
about you?
So yeah, something that kind of popped up when you were talking about moving to the United States and New York specifically. So I was raised and born in New York, right? So I was always in and around a variety of people. I was always around black people, white people, Hispanics, Asians. So I was always around everybody, and I was always seeing how everything kind of worked out for everybody. So I
Mhm.
think that's one of the reasons why I kind of approach things with an open mind, because I've always come from a diverse background. I've already lived and experienced in a culture that's always been diversified, and there's always a lot of. I mean, there's depending on the person, right? If you do your best to just try to take the best from people, or do the best from different cultures, or the best from different perspectives, and integrate that into yourself, and try to just take the best from everybody, and don't take the bad habits or the bad aspects, then you're really going to find that you always have an open mind to try new things, because there's always something new or better to improve upon. And you know we've talked about it before, life is about experiences, and just trying to improve day to day, because what else do we have, right? Because at the end of the day, we know two truths, right? We're going to die, and we're going to get taxed. Those are the two truths that are always constant. So
You say we're gonna
there you
get
go.
taxed.
We're going to get taxed.
No, you know the ways to avoid taxes.
Maybe, but oftentimes most people don't, and then boom, they get caught, and then they get thrown in jail.
True. Now, ultimately, when you mentioned the concept that the need to be right, I think like for in my head, it came across to like ego. And if your ego, it's kind of like I learned this on psychology. Like the three selves: the ego, the super ego, and then there's another one. And it has to be a constant balance of that. Else, one part or one aspect of your life is always going to be winning the other side, and that's just gonna make you look like a fool around other people. Because if you're not open-minded and you think that you're better than everybody else, then people, they're not gonna go and maybe socialize with you or talk to you. And yeah, I think that's a bit uh what do I say, like, not healthy for you at all. Because
Yeah,
then
it's a waste of time as well.
it
You
would
don't
be a
get to
waste of time.
experience.
Because later on, life itself will show you, like, some experiences. Like, I believe in karma, and I know you do too. And they come back to life. Maybe later on, you're gonna meet somebody who resembles the young past of you, and you're just like, damn, I was like you. And you're gonna be amazed to see yourself, somebody else who's doing the same mistakes. And what are you gonna do? You will try to help them, maybe guide them, or mentor. And yeah, I think it's a curious topic that you brought out today.
Mhm,
Need to be
for
right.
sure. In that specific scenario, when you find somebody that was similar to you when you were young,
Right.
and like you feel that you feel compelled to help them, definitely that's something where you're never going to be able to talk to them and show them that they're wrong, because everybody's stubborn at some point. So most people are going to be stubborn about that. So the only thing that you can do there is just be an example, and whenever they come to you for help, you're there, and that's it. You shouldn't be forcing yourself into their lives, into their ideas and their perspectives, because at the end of the day, that's how you push people away. They become resentful of you trying to force yourself into whatever it is that they do. um let's see, you have anywhere else you want to go with it?
I think we covered most of the topics. I mean, that where you can go. Like I said, this can also go into like a little bit more into like ethics and morals.
Mhm.
Because yes, you know what's ethically correct in your life because the way that you were raised. But then the
Mhm.
laws that we have, they're based on those ethics, on the maybe on the need that they need to be right. But those are like beneficial for like a country or for like the people who found it. That's what I'm thinking about. I don't know. What do you think?
So give me an example. Like, what's a concrete example of that idea?
For example, let's say one really good one is monoganism.
Monogamy.
Monogamy. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So that you need to marry just one wife. That became a rule or like a law based on religion, or maybe it is a law actually. I don't think you can marry it like legally to wives or to husbands.
Depends on where you are.
Right. No, but like I mean like in the US. Like specifically in the US, that's the law. And that's because it was based on a religion. And it was just like ethically that had to be right. That made sense for everybody, for all men to get one woman. That
Right.
was right at that time, you know?
Hmm.
And that was beneficial for like the country or for the people who wrote that law. So see,
Right.
so they needed, or they had to be right at that point.
Uh-huh.
But it's it's not like how we see in other culture, other countries, that they have a different approach to that.
Yeah, for
It,
sure.
I'm thinking
So
of
then it's definitely an interesting perspective, because at one end of the spectrum is like, who does this benefit, right? Does it benefit, like, again, you're saying it's either benefiting like the whole country, everybody as a whole, or is it benefiting a specific group of people?
Mhm.
And well, I mean, it's hard to say, but in that case specifically with monogamy, one of the biggest issues that most people have is finding somebody, right?
Mhm.
Like finding somebody that they can partner up with and actually procreate. Because again, I would say that's probably the only reason why you want to be in a monogamous relationship, is because you want to have children and you want to have a family that sticks together, right? And
Mhm.
that's how you basically raise the best children, is by having one family unit. Um, so yeah, that became beneficial for everybody simply because that's allowed us to become the civilization that we are today. That allowed people to not be so concerned with needing to, well, find sex, right? Because that's one of the most basic human urges. It's to have sex and have sexual desires and procreate, right?
Hmm.
And if people are having issues with this, that's going to consume a lot of the time. But once that problem is solved with monogamy, now they have more free time to do other things. And in the case of where we're at today, kind of just solve problems and propagate the civilization that we have to something new, to new heights, to new limits, and see where we can go with it.
Well, my question is more like, don't you think certain laws were created on the need to be right for some group of people in order to control like the mass population, or in order to create a sense of community or a sense of a nation that benefit that group of people?
I mean, I would
We,
say
we can go
that,
really deep on this on this topic, but
yeah, sure. I mean,
maybe
we can take
we can save it for another time, or maybe we can kind of mix it with another like ethics or something.
for
That
sure.
would be an interesting topic on its own.
Sure. Sounds good. Yeah. We can leave it for another time.
All
Any
right.
closing thoughts?
Yeah, closing thoughts. I think you once again, one of my favorite quotes is that all I know is that I know nothing, because every day you learn something new, whether it's from school, whether it's from family members, ex- experiences, and you can even learn from somebody who is younger than you, or like kids. And you should always approach it with an open-mindedness, because life is going to throw you slaps in the face, and and you will realize that it's not as you thought it was. And the sooner you realize that, or the not sooner, I would say that the more open-minded that you are to understand this, the happier you will be to, and the more you will get to know yourself as well.
I would even say the less stress it brings into your life, right? Because again, you're not tied down
Yeah.
to any particular concept or idea. So a lot of times people get stressed out because like they need to be right. This has to work, right? It's like trying to fit a square piece into a round hole.
Mm,
You're just forcing this piece in as much as humanly possible, but it's not going to go in. So just have, like, again, be open-minded, be malleable, be how does Bruce Lee say it? Be like water. You got to be able to free
Rather,
flow,
my friend.
right? You got to be able to free flow with ideas and concepts and never feel like you have to have this sense of being right with this idea, because at the end of the day, we don't know. And later on in life, you'll see. You'll see if you were right or wrong. But there's no need to stress yourself out now with needing this thing to be right now.
Exactly.
If
Yeah.
it works for you, it works for you. And leave it at that.
Exactly. All right, then let's wrap that up. We will see you next episode. We don't know when, but we will see you then. Peace out.
Peace.
What the is we doing?